Hello, everybody, and welcome to YouTube Mainline. Once they go to YouTube Mall Builders, there you can check on the schedules for the Tuesday, Wednesday shows. Those start at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. The Thursday night show, weekly show, and the Saturday once a month show, those start at 9 o'clock Central and 10 o'clock Eastern Time. And also be sure to click on the eMag and sign up for that so you get an email notification. That came out a little over a week ago, and that was dedicated to N-Scale. So be sure to check it out. Sign up for notifications so you'll get notified when it comes out. Yeah. I'm getting kind of bad about this, losing my train of thought. Alrighty, well, I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and just get on into the show here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ralph. So, Ralph, it's all yours.
It's all mine. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to quickly washes and oils, and we did a grime film on the car, and we ended up with something that sort of looked like this. This was the sample I did. So this week I have two cars that I'm going to play with. Almost looks like a mirror image, but it's not. These have been faded down. You can see the difference in the red from the bottom to the top. And these were compliments of Lloyd. They're his cars, so once they're done, they're going to go back onto his railroad. So one of the things that I was going to show you tonight, or a few of the things, but starting off with these cars, this particular one had a roof walk on it. And if you can at all, it's better to take it off, which I did. That way you can do the rusting on the roof, and once that's done, you put the walkway back on again and you have the rust. Then we do grime on the sides, a different type of grime this time. So what I'm going to start off on is the silver roof. And it's easy to do. You get your makeup sponge, you get your gouache, put a little bit on the ceramic that I work on all the time. My sponge is damp, it's not wet, so it's damp to the touch. And what I do is I take my spray bottle, I just spray a bit more and scrunch it all together so that the water is distributed in the sponge. And when you wet the sponge, it tends to grow, which is good because now you have a larger surface to work with. So I take it like that. I put my finger in the middle. So that I get a sort of a ball. And I come down over here on top of the paint and keep dabbing it until it blends like that. And then you come back to the car and go down the middle. And you don't have to go in a straight line, you go in a line. It doesn't really on it. It's a real easy process to do. You can come down, you can pick one panel if you want. And I found Post-it notes are a great help rather than using masking tape because they have that sticky part on it. So if I want to put something down here like that, and I don't want to go heavy on that other area, I can do that. I can do it in the one spot. To dry out quickly. So now I'm going to do the other car. Same idea. Oops, I don't need all that paint. But now I can do a larger area because it's an older car. And what ends up happening, if you've ever stood on top of an overpass and watched the cars go by, that's the best time to see what the tops of the roofs look like, especially if you got a cell phone with you. Take some pics, because all the sites that have these prototype photos on them do not have pictures of the roofs. So it's to your advantage if you can to take pictures. Now I'm going to do a little bit more over here because this is where the ramp is for the walkway, and the same on the other side. So that done, I can now put the walkway back on again, although I'm not going to do it now, but it's once I've got it, I can put it on and then weather this as well, the same way. That's the tops. Once I've got it the way I want, and I spray it with a clear coat, a matte or semi-gloss, doesn't really matter. Matte's better than the semi-gloss because it tends to hold more of the pigment that's in the paint, and it just works better. So now, one of the things that to understand about the cars, you've all seen them, and I don't know whether you can notice it there. From here to here, it's the top part of the rail that the door slides on. It's also an eaves trough. So it stops water from running off the roof. It brings it over to the ends, and that's where it drips down. So when you end up with a car like this, all the dirt and grime that comes off the roof goes down at the end of the eaves trough. So that's the sort of thing you're going to do down the side. Plus some scratches and whatever else, wherever there are lots of wear points on the door. So that's what you're looking for. So in this case, we'll add just a bit more. I need more moisture. Okay. Take it a little closer to the edge. It's hard to hang on to the sponge, but it does work. There we go, a bit more. Come down over the door first. Okay. So using that same principle, I'm going to start on the side. And I'm going to bring my Post-it note back again. I'm also, and this is just rough on this part, I'm going to come back with a different product in a minute, and I'm going to show you how that works.
Yeah, I'll let everybody know there is technical difficulty with the internet on my end, so I apologize for that, but we're going to have to put up with me dropping in and out tonight for whatever reason. But you can back the timeline up just a slight bit on your viewer. That will help. But
Okay, so now I said I'm going to use a different product, and in order to use that different product, I have to seal what I've done. So out comes the airbrush again. One of the products I mentioned to you the other night was the Vallejo matte varnish. I also use Tamiya X35, which is semi-gloss. And you mix it with a little bit of alcohol. I usually, oh, wow, that's stuck on pretty good. So here's another little tip. I told you about the lobster elastics. Now, I know a lot of people don't eat broccoli and they don't like those kind of greens. Well, they come wrapped with these elastics on them. And they're perfect to put over the jars. One on the top, one on the bottom. Grippers. Now it opens. Okay. Just let me get a bit of alcohol. And the alcohol that I use, I get it at Costco, Price Club, whatever you want to call it. It's isopropyl alcohol, 99%. Comes in I think it's 500 milliliter bottle. It's about a half a quart. And you get it from them in there's 4 bottles to a package. I go through it quite a bit, so and I mix this stuff about 50-50. Let me see here. Yeah. And the reason I use the 99% alcohol is so that it dries quick. You don't have to. You can use a lesser, like 70% alcohol, which is more common. It's just that it has more water in it. Okay, on goes the compressor. Okay. Do a little bit on the top. And you can see when the varnish hits it, it turns a little bit darker. That's until it dries. Okay, I'm out of frame, but I'm doing the other side, and I have to turn it around. So now the process, how much is left? That's enough. Okay. All that does is seal it so that I can use my next step. My next step is an oil-based product, and it's either AK Interactive or MIG Ammo product. I use the MIG. It's basically the same stuff, whether it's MIG or AK. My go-to color is Streaking Grime, number 1203. I don't know. Come on, focus. Doesn't want to. Anyway, it's 1203. And this stuff, like the other grime we put on, you use it pretty much the same way. You put it on haphazardly. You don't have to worry about how it goes on because you're going to take it off. So I use a cheap brush. I made myself a little block of wood so that when I'm got the jar open, it's not going to fall over. There. And this stuff, it's easy to do. You just put it on, and you don't have to cover the whole thing, because as you start taking it off, you're going to take it off with a brush and thinners. You'll spread it out because you're not going to leave it this thick. On the side here, same way. Some on the door. It doesn't have to be covered completely. Like I said, you're gonna be brushing it off anyway. Okay, so much for that. Let me close this and open a container of AK and MIG. They call it white spirits. And white spirits basically is mineral spirits. For those who do actual oil painting, landscapes, that sort of thing, you can probably get it at an art supply under the name white spirits. But believe me, if I was to take, this is the same size jar as the mineral spirits. If I take that jar, go and add your mineral spirits and then come back once it's soft a bit. Okay, let me get the other side again. Well, it seems like my technical buddy's having technical problems. Okay. No. Now the trick to this is going in a straight line. You get to the area where the ladders are, you stab at it a little bit, and then come back. So if I go slowly, it takes more off. If I go quick, it takes less. But then I can go back and sort of just manipulate it, because you got the mineral spirits on the brush. It's going to do a number on it. You can come back and do it over again after you've done, if you're not happy with the way it finished off. And then, of course, you have to be careful of what type of doors you have. The grime is going to end up underneath the ribs, so you may want to go the other way. And right in here is on the inside of the trough. Come down, take a bit more off. And then over here, this is an area where I want to take as much off as possible, because this is going to be a fairly clean area behind the door here, because it's underneath that trough. So right up to the second panel. There. Then over here, so that's, and I don't know if you can actually see that or not. Why is there a mark there? Oh well, we'll come back and get it after. I'll do it again. So that's one way. The other way of doing it is with oil dots. And it's basically the same thing, except you have to spread out the dots that you put on and then take it off. So I'm going to move this car out of the way for the time being. Pick up the other one. Just set that brush down. Where's my skinny one? Okay. So here's my oil paints. This is dark. You can use all kinds of different colors, and it doesn't have to be. This is burnt umber. Doesn't have to be all burnt umber. But I take it right from the tube onto the brush and do dots all over the place. So this is a plug door, I guess, double door. Okay, that's for starters. That's the burnt umber. I had some other colors here I wanted to add. You may find this interesting color to put on, but it does work. It's called turquoise lights. And believe me, it's turquoise. You don't want to put a whole lot on, but okay. Come on. There we go. Lid didn't want to go back on. I have a greenish gray as well. You can pick and choose all your colors. This one here, it's kind of on the dark side, but not that we've gone over to the dark side, but the other thing I want to get in here is my white. Looks like it has chicken pox. Okay, in comes the white. Oh, lobster claw elastic, can't get it open. There we go. Maybe it's because my fingers are so sensitive, delicate. No laughter. Okay. Let go. Okay, now another one the lid doesn't want to go back on. There we go. So I have a similar brush as the big one that I was using. It's a little bit thinner. Where'd my, there we go. So again, it's the same thing. You wet the brush, blot it, come back and start doing this. So the idea is to make all the dots sort of disappear and blend in. Even a yellow would have been good on here, which I don't have. Okay, Now, you let that dry a little bit. Out comes the trusty fan again. And then you go back to the wider brush again. Okay. Now these two, this technique and the one I showed you earlier, or the other one, there are two things that you're going to have to get used to and decide which one you like the best, because this one doesn't always work for people. So the one thing you want to do next time you're around and there's a garage sale or a flea market or whatever, you pick up the $3-4 cars and you bring them home. And what's the old saying? Practice, practice, practice. So that's one side. Now, when this is dry, I will go back and use the previous technique on top of this. After I would seal it again with the Tamiya or the Vallejo satin finish, and then come back at it with another coat of the streaking grime to finish it off. But if you're anything like me, thank God there's lines on here because I can follow the lines. But if you're, I used to be able to draw a straight line without a ruler, and it was pretty well straight. I mean, I was trained to do architectural drawings and so on. I can't do that anymore. Every time I bring my brush down like this, it tends to want to go off on a little bit of a curve. So what I do to help me is I take another brush and I use the side of it to guide me. And it's always straight. As long as I'm touching the brush here, like this, I can make a straight line. I don't have to worry about going off to the side. And again, it's the slower you go, more comes off. And on this car, the eaves trough is from there to there. So this is going to be relatively clean. And here. Then you come back and you just add, I would add rust in areas like, here's the doorstop here and here. They have doorstops at the other end as well. I would add a little bit of rust on there. You can actually add scratch marks because maybe the door has been banged out of shape and it scratches the side of the car as it opens. All of your latches and mechanism for the door, the hinge points, they're all going to have rust on them. And a little bit more grime where if somebody on the ground is opening it, they're going to put their dirty hands on to pull it or push it or whatever. But that's those two techniques that I use the most. Now, I'm going to show you something else because it doesn't show up on a red car, but I'm going to show you this other thing. We're going to go back to this again. This is our test piece from last week. Now, if anybody's used to cutting plastic styrene, maybe you don't know what that is, or maybe you do. That's for scribing lines on the plastic. Use your straight edge and you follow along. You do a couple of scores and the styrene will actually break on that line. If you don't have one of these, you can take your knife blade and turn it backwards. So the sharp edge is on top and you pull that along your straight edge and that'll do the same thing. What it does is it pulls the styrene out in front of the blade. And I can show you that. First, I'll do it with this. I'll move it up so you can see the curl of plastic that comes off. There, you see that? If I do it with the blade, I'll get the same thing. Not as much because it's a thinner point, but it does the same trick. There's some on the blade tip. So that's what it does. Now, you're going to have on your models lines and things like that. Let me just clean that last one up a bit. Okay. So you're going to have these lines on your model and you're going to say, well, what the hell am I going to do with that now? You want this stuff to get into the crevices and this is where this stuff really shines. You can already see it's in the lines. At least I can. Clean my brush a bit. Okay. Dry it off a bit. I love this fan because you can knock your fingers with it and it doesn't hurt. Not that I'm a sissy or anything, but I don't like cutting my hands. It's Johnny knows. He's watched me on our nightly chat. I have 3 or 4 different bottles of crazy glue around, not just for putting things for models together, it's for closing up cuts that you open up with a knife. So it ends up in the crevices. And let's see. Get a nice fine brush. There's a new product on the line by MIG Ammo, and it's called oil brushers. And these things do pretty much what I'm doing right now. So I'm going to pull one out that is the rust color. That's what it looks like. Oil brusher. And it's like, if you guys remember when the wives or the girlfriends pull out a bottle of nail polish, there's a brush inside. A nice fine point brush that you can add color. And you come back with a brush like this, loaded with spirits. and you can thin it and drag it down. So this is the kind of stuff you can put in around the doors on the car. If it's too heavy, you go back and you take some off. You work at the side of it instead of right on it. Basically what you're doing is you're blending the color in too. So if I had that all along the top, I don't know whether you can see that. So we have any questions out there yet, John?
North Star Railroad Lines, Dwight. Nice, Ralph. Shame to dirty a perfectly clean car. Run it through the wash rack. LOL. Dwight can't stand to dirty his cars up. He likes them new looking. No, I think everybody's pretty enthralled, as Big Bill would say, in what you're doing. Now these brushes you're using,
my airbrush hose, knocked it to the floor.
Yeah, these brushes you're using on the weathering, you keep those
so
separate?
That. The other thing we did, the rust dots the other night, we can do the same.
Have y'all got questions? Throw them up here for him.
And because I felt at one point the brush that's in this oil brusher was too thick, I took a toothpick, one of those round toothpicks. Take the paint off the brush with the toothpick, and just do little spots.
I didn't realize, Ralph, you couldn't hear me. My mic got muted. Uh, did you hear me talking about Dwight's comment?
No.
Okay. Let me get back up here. Yeah, Dwight said, nice, Ralph. Shame to dirty a perfectly clean car. Run it through the car wash rack. LOL. He likes his cars clean.
Dwight, it's Canadian car. It's okay.
Yeah. Josh here said, have to say it looks good, but I'm confused because the stream keeps cutting in and out. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm having internet difficulties tonight. Was the styrene example for the door scratching, the body, or another aspect?
Another aspect where you would have grooves. Like I have this groove along the side of the door, and I want to accent it. So I would use some of that and let the rust flow on the one side of the door. When I have, here's a placard post, or whatever you want to call it. So I would have a little bit of rust coming down from here. I can do it the way I showed on the plastic, or I can do it with this. Now, where's my little brush?
While you're doing that, Dwight asked, best brushes for weathering. What brushes do you like? He said, is that, say, flat, round, etc.?
Well, for what I'm going to do right now, it's a flat brush. I apply with a round brush. My fine detail brush is round, but very long bristle. The one I was adding dots with before is also round, but it's, I don't know whether you can see it, there's hardly any bristles there at all. They're about an eighth of an inch long, maybe not even. So it's a matter of what you get used to. Just make sure that they are brushes that you can use oil-based paints with, because some of them you can't. Here we go. So when I do this, I start above where my oil is and come down past it. That one I want to do over again. So here we are on the door, same thing. That's all there is to it. It's just a matter of getting used to. And if it didn't work the first time, or it didn't work the way you like it, go back, take it off, and start again. Let it dry, and then get your toothpick again, get your color, and start over. And what I do is I'm putting it on the bottom edge of the lettering. It might be too much.
Well, Andrew says, I'm enthralled watching this. At the same time, I keep thinking of the original wreck at Ralph in a good way. And Josh has asked, this isn't the Josh we know, it's a different Josh V. I also would like to ask, do you use acrylic-based paints, or do you stay away from those?
For what? What am I using acrylic for doing this?
Yes.
No, I do not use acrylic-based paints for this. There's very little working time, and you can't go back and correct it once you make a mistake, other than repainting the whole thing.
Phil here asks, what are the brushes material made of? Hog hair, nylon, just hair? What?
Don't use nylon. Nylon brush is going to be attacked by the mineral spirits. So you want natural hair of some sort. And if you go to an artist shop, you'll be able to find, they'll be able to tell you which ones are suited for what you want it for oil based.
Usually the racks of brushes will tell you oils, acrylics, water.
Yep, they do. So, with that said, just let me, what do I got here? I'm going to grab up some pictures. Well, maybe I should do boxcars and so on first. Weathered cars, since that's what we're working on. Okay, share the screen. So there's a similar boxcar, except the Pac-Man symbol's on the other side. You can see up underneath the CP where the rust is trailing down. And what I did to make it look like it was patched, I took some 3M Magic Mending Tape, the one that's in the plaid container. It's sort of frosted when you hold it up, and then it disappears when you put it down. So I covered up the original lettering and the car information, the same over here, the build marks, and taped them up so that when I did all my weathering and peel the tape off, it looks like that's been patched over. That's one way of doing it. There's another one that was a black engine. You all know Santa Fe. It's a black engine, faded down with that mix that I talk about, 90% paint, 90% alcohol, 10% paint, and then very lightly go over it with some weathering material. In this case, I used a gouache, a very light gouache. I have the oil streaks that come down from your fill caps and so on. I have rust coming down from where the exhaust is. More oil over there, and the same on the trucks. There's another look at it. I also used a combination of gray and black, or white and black, to fog this out a bit more and make the white look dirty. So the roof is done the same way I did on this roof with the sponges. with the concentration of color on the edges and on the corners. And then from the stack, this is where I use my powders. I'll have a little streak of black on the roof there, and maybe a little bit from here back. This was just an experiment play around car, and I was trying all different things. So there's the drag down rust spots done the same way, a scrape mark, excessive rust coming from underneath the eaves trough area, and the same with the trucks, excessive rust because this thing's been sitting on a siding for years, hasn't been used. And that's painted plastic to look like wood. So there's a brand new grain car, and there's a weathered one. And this was done for PWRS, the Pacific West Rail Cars system. They're the ones that made the car. And this is done with the ammo on the sides and the top, streaking grime. I used the fiberglass brush to take away some of the Pillsbury sign and the wording. CN gondola. Wear off some of the paint with the fiberglass brush. Come back with a little bit of oil to simulate the rust in a few spots, and a little darker there, a little brighter here. That just varies the color instead of everything being the same. This is all done the same way. This is done with the grime that we did last week that I showed you in the presentation, and almost cleaned off completely, just enough to change the color to a slight brown. And then after that was dried and sealed, I put on the AK, or the MIG ammo, streaking grime. And this is done the same way as I was doing these two red cars. So in this area, you find it's a little bit cleaner, but maybe the guy who was painting this logo on here was a little bit too aggressive with his knife when he cut the masking tape, and he cut through to the bare steel, and eventually it starts to rust through. That was one of my cars that appeared on Model Railroad Hobbyist magazine. It's an old truck. That's my SD40 on Mike Hamer's layout in Ottawa. SD40-2, pardon me. Dan, I'm sorry if I said it wrong. So there's my SD40, and there's a U30, I believe. I can't remember now. And if you can't tell by now, I'm a CN fan. So again, this same thing, the scratch and your rust from all the brackets. Just drag it down. There's that car. I ended up giving that one away to a friend of mine in Ottawa, Chris Lyon. CN LVN. This one was done with the gouaches like we did last week or last time, and these streaks are also done with gouache. There's no oils on this except for the basic grime. This car, I weathered it. I don't know whether it's correct or not because I couldn't find a prototype photograph to work from. But it had a wooden deck up here, a steel deck down here. The pictures that I did have had a little bit of rust in this area because that's generally another spot where they anchor things. The deck was almost black with grime. And that used to be part of a stapler that belonged to my son. It's an electric stapler. That's part of it. It worked 3 times and then it stopped working, so I took it over. And I took it apart. There's the base to it. And this steel deck, the ends were yellow because it's checker plate, and this is a regular steel deck in here, and it was sort of a silver color, and all I used was a sponge and the gouaches to add the rust. And these little marks that you see here, let me blow it up a bit. These ones here, these are done with a paper clip, flattened out the end, dipped into crazy glue, and then touched to the deck. So it left a bubble of crazy glue or a lump of crazy glue. I let it dry and I rusted it. Typically on these cars, they didn't have an awful lot of anchor points. They actually welded to the deck to hold chains down and then used chain clamps to tighten it up. So there's your weld marks. And it's easy as pie to do. This is all done with gouaches and a little bit of powders, not a whole lot, just a little bit up near the top. And then blended down, washed off with a brush so that it wasn't completely covered with powder. This white stain up here, this is a calcium carbonate car. So from what I remember from calcium, it's a white material, and if it spills out, it's going to dry up. And that's what I did. I used white powder mixed with hairspray to fix it in place. And once I had it the consistency I wanted it, and it was dry, then I just oversprayed it with dull coat. The same idea on this car. This was an experiment. The outside is done the way I've been doing all of this. The inside is done with a product called Fantastic Finishes. And Fantastic Finishes is a product that I'm not even sure if you can still get it. I bought it at Michael's, and it's meant for painting clay pots. It's a 2-part system. And what you do is you paint on the first system, which has a bunch of iron filings in it. And then you come back with the second part, and within 5 minutes of putting it on, you can see the rust already forming. Well, I did that inside, and then for some reason I had to put this car away along with some other stuff, and it sat in a box for a year. And when I took it out, the inside of this was full of fur, fuzz, whatever. The rust had continued to form. So I had to clean it out with a wire brush, and that's the way it ended up. And that's the white powders again mixed with hairspray. And I use aim powders or Bragdon powders. What else have I got here?
I'll tell you what, Josh B. said, I'm convinced to switch my approach as well to weathering.
Oh, yes. Now, the dots that I used, this is not my work, but this was done in that same format. This is, I believe, an SD40-2, but it was done the same way, dots and then with mineral spirits. This is a friend of mine, lives in Calgary.
Oh man, here we go again. Shit. Come on.
Happened again, eh?
Yeah. We're back.
Okay. Yeah, I saw my screen go funny, so I continued, stopped. So this is all done with the oil dots, and I don't know whether you can see the roof.
Yeah.
You have the option of taking a very fine brush and doing those little dots with acrylic paint, and do it randomly, and I challenge anybody to do it randomly. And you can do the edges as well. You can also do it with a sponge, and not just any sponge. It's a black foam sponge. It's kind of hard, stiff, closed cell foam. You see it in electronic packaging. It looks like an egg crate. You break off a piece. I'll show you after I get rid of the pictures, but you break off a piece and you dip it in paint. You dab it until you get most of the paint off, and then go onto your model, and it leaves little marks like that. Now the fellow that did this, I don't know if any of you guys know him. His name is Rodney Walker. And then there's this one. This is an interesting paint job, actually. Southern Pacific never had an AC6000. They may have had them on order, but they never received them. And Broadway Limited decided in their infinite wisdom, we're going to put it out on the market as a Southern Pacific. Union Pacific was the only one at the time that had the AC6000. So when I saw this, I thought, oh, I got to do this. And then it ended up being done for a store owner. Here's the Santa Fe one. So you notice from there down it's sort of foggy. That's to simulate road dust. Little bit of fresh rust where the springs are bouncing up and down all the time. And then, of course, the wet oil streaks. There's some on the bearings as well, on the underside of the bearings, the bearing cups. Okay. This was also done for my buddy in Ottawa, and then he took his layout down. And before I could give it to him, he ended up saying, "It's yours." So it now resides on my layout. And this is the one I did for Joe Fugate. So there's how it started out. And that's how it ended up. There was a lot of dirt and grease that ended up on this thing because these bearings are different than normal bearings. They don't have a box or what do you call it, an oil cup sort of thing. And it just leaks all over the place. And every once in a while, they end up taking a bearing out, and the plate that holds the bearing in place ends up looking way out of place because it's brand new. It's still got paint on it. There. So this is on my back fence. So that I have a hydro field, electric towers and so on in the back. And I just put it on the fence, take the picture. So it looks like it's part of the scenery. And that's the picture we advertise with. So that should do it. If we have any more questions.
Got a couple of comments. Well, I got a comment and a question.
Okay.
Josh B. is a comment. I'm convinced to switch my approach as well to weathering. I've been using acrylics and powders, but oil paints seem to work better based on what I'm seeing. And then Ron's trains in things. Your powders with hairspray. I'm correct to assume you mix the powder and hairspray before applying, and what do you apply it with?
Okay. I have the brush that I normally apply my powders with is this one here. It was an 1/8" flat brush, but because of the way I scrub the powders in, I always scrub it in. I don't just put it on and move it around. I scrub it in. So my brush is gone sort of to a point. But what I do is I take hairspray. I have a pump spray rather than an aerosol. I spray it into a little cup, dip my brush into the hairspray, go into my powder container, dip the tip into the powder, and then onto the car. If that's not enough, I go back and get more powder, put it back in the same spot, or work it around. And what you end up with is what looks like festering rust. It's not necessarily going to be the right color, so you come back afterwards after the hairspray's dried and you've coated it with dull coat. You come back afterwards with some gouache and a makeup sponge and do that over the top of it, and it looks natural after that. So I hope that answers your question. And Ron, you know where to find me.
Yeah. He's got your 1-800 number.
Oh, and Dwight says, how do you paint plastic to look like wood?
Yeah.
I start off with the base color, what I think is the lightest color in the wood that I want to simulate. And then when the paint is wet and I'm applying it with my brush, not an airbrush, with my paintbrush, I'm adding clumps of pigment powder into it and spread it around. Let's see if I can find that picture again.
Yeah, Ron says, perfect, thanks.
There. So what I've done, I take the lightest color, which is in this area, even though that's a little bit weathered, but I take that color and paint the whole thing. And as I'm going along, I add different colors of powders to the paint and spread it across. In this case, I've cut out a little bit of the plastic to make it look like some of the wood is missing. The same over there and the same there. And then add a little bit darker to make it look like an oil spill. And that's what I get. So I hope that helps you, Dwight. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, Dwight said thanks, Ralph.
You're welcome. Anything else we missed?
I think we're pretty good.
Josh, no, okay, so we'll set something else up, or I will. And what did we say? The 26th of December, John?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll see you guys then. And if you have any comments or questions, put them underneath the video from the last time or under this one, and I will try and answer them for you. Which brings to mind, there was a question that came up from the last time. Somebody made a comment. I mentioned that I used to be a member of Model Trains Weathered. The owner saw the video and he commented on the video, and he was quite happy to see it being shared. And then there was another fellow came up and said, so what you're telling me is this and that and the other. And I said, yeah, basically. He wasn't too happy that I presented this thing that Rich and I put together. He thought it was Rich's, but and it was. I got permission from Rich to do it. So it's shared program, and I got a lot of stuff from those guys. It's all about sharing. So that's it.
All right, well, everybody's saying thanks. Great presentation. Apologize for the inconsistent internet tonight, but I guess because most of my streams are running flawlessly, I got to pay occasionally. So, yeah.
It happens.
Yeah. Let me get over here and do transition. Well, appreciate another great show there, Ralph. And we appreciate everybody out in the chat with your questions and comments. Like to say, go to YouTubeModelBuilders.com. There you'll find the schedules for the Tuesday and Wednesday shows. Those are aired at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. The Thursday every week and the Saturday once a month air at 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Also, be sure and click on the eMag and sign up for an email notification so when it comes out, you'll get notified of that. The November issue's out. Won't have another one until January. And that was on N Scale. So be sure to check it out. That was a good issue. Also, let's go over the month of December because this show here is the last of the November scheduled shows. December the 6th, we'll have Arduino show. Then December the 12th is a show with Miles Hale. December the 14th will be the Fine Scale. That's on a Thursday, I know. And we will air that one at the regular Tuesday time, which will be 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern. We had to move it because Christmas holidays. People are going to be traveling. They're in the show. December the 16th will be Big Bill and Barry, the live show. Then the next week on December the 20th will be Into the Locomotive Shop with Joe. And that'll be Bill hosting that, I believe it is. Barry's going to stream it. And December the 26th, day after Christmas, will be Ralph's Weathering Show. So the schedule is posted on YouTubeMallBuilders.com, so you can go there and check the schedule again. I did want to go over it right here real quick because I did have to shift some shows around because of the holidays. So I didn't want people getting messed up on the schedules. But we're trying to hold the shows. The Fine Scale's the only one that's on a Thursday, so instead of being at the Thursday time slot, I will air it at the Tuesday, so regular time slot, 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern time. So that's it for that. I will be here Thursday night, hopefully. If the creek don't rise and my internet don't flood. But hope you all enjoyed. I know you did enjoy. So we shall catch you Thursday night. Until then, everyone have a good one, and we'll see you later.
Take care.